your phones out and your ring lights. We about to go live. Come on your phone screen, man, we going live.
Welcome back to another episode of the Ty Brady Way. Today I have Marley Majcher on the show. And, we were talking a little bit before the show. I always like to do that a little bit. But, Marley, let's tell the audience about who you are and what you do, and let's start there. So welcome.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. And so the little bit about where I am, what I do, would take an hour, so I'm going to make it super brief. And you pull whatever string you want to pull. But I'm basically a serial entrepreneur. My core business is called The Party Goddess, which is a celebrity-based catering and event planning company in LA. And I did that because I got into the restaurant business after interviewing a chef when I was at Georgetown, and decided I needed to marry him, even though he's 20 years older, and got into the restaurant business, started a catering company, then started the full event production company. About halfway in, I wrote a business book to solve my own problems called But Are You Making Any Money? Because while I had just gotten a business degree, I seemed incapable of applying what I had learned with my very expensive education to my own entrepreneurial journey. So I ended up writing a book about that, and then kind of have this consulting piece called The Profit Goddess for other people who are stuck in the same boat. And then I've dabbled in, and still do, commercial real estate and projects like that with my dad. And that led me to my latest train wreck of deciding I wanted to be a rancher. So I bought 20 acres of land in Santa Ynez, which is like Santa Barbara County, and have learned very quickly that doing rehabs on buildings is very different than bringing water and electricity to a dirt site. So that's kind of the net as we start.
Wow. That's a lot of good stuff to talk about. So I just want to, on farming, what type of farming?
Okay, so a few years ago, went to the Faroe Islands because that was on my bucket list, because supposedly they have one of the oldest breeds of sheep in the world. And so randomly, that was just on my list. So I finally get to go. I go to the Faroe Islands, and I'm at the sheep processing plant because, again, it's all about the sheep. And I learned that they have this backlog of like 2 years worth of wool that they have no market for. And I learn all about the market from them. I end up spending the day there. And I am shocked to hear that, it makes perfect sense, but with technology, right? You don't need a wool sweater anymore to go fishing. You don't need a wool sweater to go skiing. We use the lighter weight technology, whatever, jacket, etc. So the wool industry, the demand has plummeted. And I was like, this is insane. But what I realized was that everybody was using wool, or trying to take wool and put it into textiles or like for clothing. And I was like, well, that's so labor intensive. It's very expensive. The demand is going down, etc. So long story short, I decided that I was going to try to help two industries at the same time. One is the fledgling farmers, ranchers of the world. And two, I'm in Southern California. So I thought, why not try to prevent the spread of wildfires? So I'm working on patents right now for my wildfire non-spreading product. And so therefore, I will be a sheep rancher. Not so much to produce I wouldn't be able to produce all the wool I need for this project, but just so that I'm kind of have my own training ground all the time available to me. And then I grow all kinds of other, vegetables and raise chickens and all that stuff. So I'm sort of going to focus on heritage breeds as well. But
A little bit self-reliance. That reminds me, a few years ago, I had the privilege of going to South Africa. And when I went to South Africa, the guy that we got to know, he was a sheep herder, but he specified in a very, very specific sheep.
Yep.
And they genetically basically put spider fibers in the wool, and that's like he has no problem selling his wool because of the fibers and what is intermixed with the wool itself. You talked about a thin layer, and that spider fiber that's in the wool
Yeah.
it's in demand because there's clothing and it's thinner and it isn't like traditional wool. And I was like, I had no idea, but they don't look like traditional sheep. They're very
Right.
short and stocky and they're not like, and I'm like, oh, okay. So you just said sheep and I was like, oh wow. I remember him telling me that story about, I mean, he's world renowned. Like, I mean, he sells it in Germany and Europe. And I mean, he can't wait. People are waiting to get his wool.
Okay, well,
Because
he's the only one on the planet that I've ever heard. So I would love to find out. I would love to get his info from you because that is really special. And when you say like spider, like literally spider.
uh-huh.
So
He said it's genetically that the wool is interwoven with fiber fibers, and he talks about the lacticity and all the things that go with it. And
yeah,
I was like, I had no idea. I mean, but he's like, no, he's like, it's thinner, it's lighter weight, and all the things that come with it. And yeah, I could connect you with you on Facebook on that. But so you're. I want to get back to, you just mentioned catering, and that also reminded me when I was a little kid, I have 8 sisters and 2 brothers, and my mom ran a wedding reception venue, and I was always the waitress or the guy. No, but how did you, I mean, that's a very specific niche.
yeah.
And you said, you specifically said celebrities, and I know in your bio, you've done some really high-end people that people would know on the show. You've catered to their events.
Yes.
So how does that come into play with, owning a restaurant and then, because how do you break into that industry?
Well, okay. So there are so many great questions in there. So I went to Georgetown and my junior year, I interviewed this chef, right? And because I decided to marry him and because I was like a goal setter, I started working in the kitchen. And then my senior year, I quit. And then he and I got engaged. And that's really where it started. Because if I wanted to ever see my husband, I would need to be in the restaurant business with him. And he was a very classically trained chef and, amazing background in New York, et cetera. So we came back to California. And how we got into it was we bought the land where an existing restaurant was and redid the property, et cetera. So that was one of my first forays into real estate. So that's how you get into it if you, kind of buy your way in some ways. And so we ran the restaurant but there were so many components to that, right? Like now I'm working with my husband who's 20 years older. I'm 22 years old at this point. My goal was to do $1 million in sales, which I did, but, was spending 1.1. So that put strain on the marriage, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And throughout, we were doing kind of the classic thing that entrepreneurs do, which is you're like, oh my gosh, I just need more revenue, more customers, and that'll solve all the problems. And so then we started getting into catering and we took over a banquet operation. And when we did that, then you've got more revenue, but you've also got more costs and you've got to be really on top of it. Well, when he and I split, I was like, okay, my dad is like, why don't you just do the catering and the event? You love that, the full production. And so that's when I started the Party Goddess and we branched out to full service event planning. Like we build the decor and rentals and all that kind of stuff. Well, at the time there's something like 465,000 event planners in the English speaking world. Okay. That's impossible to compete with. And so I thought, what's my unique selling proposition? It's like celebrities, right? Like I remember just being in high school, we'd go for spring break or something. In those days, you had paper magazines, and I would sit next to these girls who had the net worth of 4 times any of these celebrities. But they would all of us were like, oh, they wore those jeans. They use that makeup. They use that. And I was just like, why are we listening to these people but that's what it is, right? If a celebrity did it, said it, and you like them, you follow it. So I thought I need to just get me some celebrities, but I was like, how am I going to do that? So I just kept telling my friends this was my goal and I needed celebrities. And one friend put me in touch with a celebrity publicist who said, hey, listen, I haven't really done it for event planners or anything other than fashion, but this is how you do it. You gift these celebrities this stuff, kind of like they do at the Oscar gifting suites. And this is how you do it. And you get in front of them. And I followed what she told me and it blew up. Like the next thing I know, I've got Britney Spears' dad on the phone, and it's like, then we're doing Sofia Vergara, and then it's like we could do Snoop Dogg. Like it just went on, and it was one of those things where once you get one, then you're kind of set, right? And it's unfortunate because in so many ways, it's like I was a great event planner before I had celebrities, but that's what the world wants to see. The world wants to see, oh, you have this, you must be good. So at some point you have to just drink the Kool-Aid, but that was the only way that we would have been able to stand out. Otherwise we were just one of 456,000 event planners.
So when you say you gifted like what? Your service, or you just basically said?
So what happens with, for people who aren't familiar, what happens with celebrities is they get gifted packages. Okay. So for example, if they go to the Oscars, they have many days ahead, or depending on the award show, where they get to go, and it's basically like, excuse me, they get to go shopping, right? And so it's like, oh, depending on their level, like A-list success, right? Because these brands know that, let's say I'm going to gift you this bag, and then celebrity is photographed with that bag. And then the brand can say, Jane Doe photograph with the Birkin bag, and all of a sudden everybody wants the Birkin bag. So what this publicist would do, and this also happens, is in the background when you're not having an award season, they would send these basically gift baskets. So it's almost like a swag bag going to the celebrity's house, right? And it's full of like clothing or belts or new skincare products. All that stuff is kind of in this quote basket, like an Easter basket, but very chic. And so she said, listen, if you want to do this, you're going to have to give them a gift certificate that's going to get in front, like going to ring their bells, right? Because they are wealthy. And so we created these she's like, it's got to be gorgeous. Well, because she was a very high-end person and she didn't want to get involved with anything that wasn't. And she was like, so we created these absolutely gorgeous gift certificates that were these Dupioni silk, and they were wrapped in French ribbon. I mean, they were insane, and they cost a fortune. So it was a big risk. And we put these certificates in, and it had the celebrity's name, and it said for, X amount of dollars. Of course, the idea being that at least that would get them to call. And so they call, and then, they would spend more than the gift certificate, or they would spend the amount of the gift certificate. And then basically from there, it started as a transaction. Like, we'll gift this to you, but we've got to be able to say that we did this event for you. And, we take a photo with you and all this stuff. And I mean, it didn't mean like, oh, great, we can sell the photos to the paparazzi, but that ended up happening. When you learn how celebrities leak everything themselves. So that's really how it started. And then once it took off, then it was like I don't want to say my regular clientele, but my clientele who could afford what our services and appreciated what we did, because we're on the higher end. Then all of a sudden they were like, oh, she does XYZ celebrities. Well, then like for sure we have to have her. And I believe that you make the most money when people are making emotional decisions about your business. So, it's much easier to charge more than everybody else when people are like, I don't care that it costs more. I want her.
My wife is a former Miss Utah American pageant winner.
Oh,
and it reminds me of, like she's been invited to Fashion Week. I mean, Mark DeFane, she was on the runway with him, and they gift her dresses and all kinds of stuff. And now she's getting hit up from all these fashion designers say, hey, I want to go to Paris. You want to go there? So it's similar how it works. It's like, in some regards, you're paying to play. Like you said, you're taking a big risk, which I like the word risk, because in life, if you're not willing to take a risk, you're never going to succeed, and you're going to miss 100% of the shots you never take. So if you're not willing to throw it out there, you're just dead in the water.
Well, right. And when I was doing that, I mean, no one, as far as I know, this was a million years ago, was really doing that. As I say, the fashion brands were and the beauty brands were, but remember, they had a much lower price point. So even if Chanel was sending their new, I don't know, workout outfit or whatever, I'm making that up. I mean, the cost of Chanel of the workout outfit, right? Not their retail, but their cost of goods sold would have been relatively low. But you realize I'm sending these gift certificates out all at the same time, right? Which meant, now we knew, that'd be a great problem if everybody called me, but potentially a lot of people could have called at the same time. These were for very, high ticket value, but also you didn't know if it was going to work. So you didn't know if everybody was going to be like make it worse for my brand, right? Like what if what if it backfired? Because it can backfire, but it turned out to be probably the best thing I'd ever done in business to this day was doing that. But it was weird.
So you just happened to connect with a PR lady. We went to lunch and she says, hey, I don't do this, but she obviously liked you and she was willing to take a risk on you, which is fascinating.
It was a little more than that in the sense of when I want something, I write out my goals and I rewrite them every day. And that was one of them. And so I am talking to people. Like I act as if I already have it in the sense of so I'm talking to my friend and my friends. And I'm like, I'd be like, do you know any celebrities that would want to have a party? Do you know any celebrities? Like, I didn't know how to do this. So all I knew was just to kind of spread the word. I don't know. And then hope get a referral. Well, one of my friends, a good friend of mine, was very good friends with this publicist because this friend of mine had been in fashion and she was a model for different things. And she said, I have this really good friend who does this. And, it was one of those things where it was like a friend of a friend, but all three of us were kind of the same person, like I happened to be in events. That one happened to be in PR. The other one happened to be in fashion, but we were all the same type of person, right? Like we all had high standards and we all had credibility in our fields. And so the referral landed well with this woman. And this woman was like, pretty much we chatted and she was like, okay, let's give it a roll. And she really changed my life.
Absolutely. So you're still doing that to this day, I'm assuming, right?
Yes. So our goal is to do really 4 to 8 events a year, 50,000 to $1 million in budget per event. And
say that again. 50 to $1 million.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's not, and I hate to say that, but $1 million is. I'm not going to say it's not that much to spend on an event, but it is very easily spent. Let's put it that way. It's just so easy. Because think about it, right? If you and your wife say, hey, we want to do something really cool where we bring in, and all you have to do is bring in X entertainment. I'm not even talking about Pink, but let's say you want to bring in some lower level, but who was on American Idol or on, you're going to pay $50,000 as a fee. Then think about it. You have to pay their transportation, their manager's transportation, all the equipment set up, flying all the equipment or driving all the equipment set up in, right? Now these days, we've got huge issues with security. So you're going to have security, photographers, insurance, tents. It goes on and on and on. And it's very expensive to do business these days. And what I say, it's very expensive to do it properly. Anybody can have an event and anybody can undercut anybody else and all that stuff, and kind of what I call the race to the bottom. But to do it properly, meaning the linens are touching the floor. They are not the run of the mill linens that you just can order online for your event. I mean, properly done. It's very expensive.
I'm blown away. My mind's sitting here 50 to $1 million. And you're talking it may be a 4 or 6 hour event. I mean, you're talking
it's always a 4. It's pretty much never 6. I mean, that's what I say is, people could buy a Maybach or they could spend 4 hours in my world, which is really what it is.
Wow. So you're doing this catering and you're very successful in that space.
Yes.
Then you said you wrote a book based on what you've learned.
I would step back. I was successful in some ways with my catering company, but I wasn't making enough money. And so my dad, who's the consummate businessman and, doesn't care, wouldn't know a celebrity party of one, said, we were at dinner and he was like, but are you making any money? This is all great. I'm glad you're doing the opening of the Hollywood Bowl. I mean, but who cares if you're not making any money? And that really stuck with me. And I thought, wow, how is it that I don't have, he was like, well, how much did you make last year? How much was this? How much? And I was like, well, EBITDA, depreciation. He's like, the frick are you depreciating? Martinis, your glasses, come on. Like, how much did you pull in? How much did you make? And I realized I am never, ever going to have this conversation again. Like with you, it was like, you're talking about your mom teaching you to do laundry and stuff. And you're like, I'm never going to have the, wrinkled clothes again. Well, I was like, I am not going to be in this situation. I'd been in this situation too many times. And I thought I need to come up, but I had bad ADHD. We didn't know it at the time. And I came up with this system that was basically simplified cost of goods sold, right? But the one thing I added to it that no business books that I could find, and I had at that point read millions of them and still do, was the key thing to pricing for entrepreneurs. After you get your cost of goods sold, and okay, great, your overhead, but it's time. And you have to track how much time you spend on your business and servicing that client, right? Because you can say all day long, a lawyer gets paid $700 an hour. Well, right. But if a lawyer has got his own firm or her own firm, right, and spends 20 hours marketing and doing all this stuff and driving back and forth to conferences to end up getting one client for 4 hours worth of work at $700, well, that's still not a great hourly rate, right? So the reason I wrote the book was A, to solve my own problems, B, to help other people who are in the same boat where they just felt like they were smart, but their brains were just swimming. Like they just felt like, I don't know how to separate this. It feels very overwhelming. Accountants and everybody want it to feel very overwhelming because then you need them. And I think we do still need accountants, but we also need real time to be able to look at our numbers and say, if I do this event, I'm going to make X amount of money. If I do, so therefore I know what to choose. Like right now is this weekend, I've got somebody who's wanted to do a project with me. It still does. And I started asking very pointed questions. She's a friend, a long time friend and colleague. She wants to do this. And I started with, okay, well, what's your goal? How much do you want to make with this? How much? And she was like, really flustered that I was asking these questions. And at first I was like, have we met? I mean, how hardcore I am now. I mean, I didn't used to be, but as a reformed addict kind of spending, I was like, she's like, well, and I thought, you're asking me to jump on a project with you. We're going to do a 50-50 revenue split, right? And presumably 50-50 time split, but you don't know how much you even want to make or how much we potentially could make. Yet I'm supposed to stop these other projects that are proven money makers, right? And jump over to that ship. It's crazy to me, but we have to begin with the end in mind. Stephen Covey.
Absolutely.
Have to. And you have to say.
It's that game plan, right? Where do you want to go? And that you talked about writing goals down.
Yeah.
Which, when you can involve more of your senses, feel it, touch it, all of those things, and you constantly remind yourself of those things, top of mind. So many people, are like, I just need to make a paycheck. I understand that, but where do you want to be a year from now? You obviously don't want to be a year from now just a paycheck. And
I agree with you. And then people, it's always followed by, but I don't have time. Okay, and that's the byline in my book is stop being busy and start creating cash. Because I get so sick of people saying they're so busy, and I'm like, well, then your car must be paid off, right? You must have no mortgage, you must have no credit card debt. If you're literally that busy, right? And so what I would say to people who are, because obviously I work with entrepreneurs who are kind of in that middle space, right? Where they're not entrepreneurs yet, they want to be, they're moonlighting, they're thinking about it. And so what the deal is it's like putting in a new workout or anything else. If you have a job you have an 8-hour-a-day job and you commute and whatever, okay, well then I would say, how are you spending your commute? Because you need to be listening to every podcast and every audio book on how to start a business, what you need to do, how to create a business plan, etc. But then I would say is when you're not working, you better carve out 30 minutes a day to figuring out what your goals are and how you're going to get there. And nobody can say they don't have 30 minutes a day. That's baloney. Otherwise, YouTube wouldn't have blown up. YouTube wouldn't have blown up. Netflix wouldn't have blown up. We all have 30 minutes a day. You can freaking find it. And if somebody's listening and says they don't, I promise you, show me your schedule and I'll find it for you.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. People are like, well, I'm so busy. I'm like, well, I get it. But if you don't take the time to change your habits, your rituals and routines, you're going to be in the exact same situation a year from now, 3 years, 5 years. So if you really, truly want to change it, you have to devote that time. I can't remember the last time I turned on my TV. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, my kids are like, Dad, let's watch a movie. That's about it. And I'll go to the movies with them. But I got better things to do.
Right.
I mean, that's
right.
But I love it. You're like, yeah, I'll tell you. And it's interesting. I've politely told people, you know, I'll interview somebody and they want help. And I'm like, you know what? All I can tell you at this point is you got to get off your couch. And some people take offense to that. And I'm just like, you're telling me all the things you're doing, but you're not getting the results you want. But yet you're telling me you're not leaving your house. You've got to get out and network. You've got to go to lunch. One of the things that somebody told me long ago is if you're going to lunch, invite somebody with you. I mean,
first of all, I say, don't freaking, one of my things is, should you be going to lunch? I don't know. My thing is maybe you should be going to coffee, and if they want to pick your brain or whatever, then you decide who drives to whom, because all that time adds up, right? And so if it could be a coordinated coffee that is like an hour long, kind of when you've got your internal agenda, maybe it isn't lunch, right? I mean, maybe it is, right? Depending on the deal. But to me, it's always like, wait a second, who wants the time? If it's somebody who wants my time, I'm always like, I'll do it virtually with you, or you can come to me. But I'm not exerting any extra effort, right? And that's when people say they don't have the time, that's when I help them find the time. I'm like, well, guess what? You're doing these repetitive tasks. You got to have that automated, and I found your 30 minutes for the day. Or like, for example, I broke my back end of November. I fell off my horse, right? But I had just launched my podcast. Well, I had a quota of a certain number of podcasts I was going to do. And so guess what? I would ice my back. I'd have my brace on. I'd take my medication. I'd tape my podcast. I'd go back to the ice. And then, you know, I got a backlog of things. It's like, and, you know, in the podcast, people were like, oh, we didn't think you were going to be able to, you know, keep up with it. And I was like, well, I signed a contract and I want to have a successful podcast. So it's like, fricker, I got so much done in the last 3.5 months with a broken back, and I only got surgery 2.5 weeks ago, right? And I have accomplished a record amount. And it's because I was like, oh, okay, I need to ice my back. Well, I'm going to ice my back and I'm going to listen to this podcast because I'm going to be on it and I need to whatever, you know, do my homework. Or I'm going to ice my back and then I'm going to do this. Or like I do this red light therapy, right? Well, it's 25 minutes. So 25 minutes of red light therapy. I'm like, I'm going to lose my mind. So then I'm like, guess what? I'm going to reread my goals for the 25 minutes that I'm doing. And let me tell you, you get very crystal clear when you're sitting there just repeating stuff like a mantra. And then you forget you don't have it. That's the other amazing thing is I truly forget that I haven't already accomplished it because I'm so used to reading it. I'm like, oh yeah, I have $1 million in cash in that account. Yeah, absolutely.
You're just so many things I can relate to just with, you know, I was talking to you earlier before we got on the show. You know, I probably have undiagnosed ADHD and I've had it since I was a kid. And people have asked me like, why don't I medicate? And I'm like, listen, I don't want to lose my edge. And if you listen to anything about ADHD, those guys, ADHD, those are the people that are entrepreneurs. Those people are 300% more likely to succeed because they know what it's like to fail. They're not afraid to take risks. You know, they were probably picked on or bullied when they were a kid, right? Or
of course, because it took us so much longer to learn basic things and we didn't know why. And we thought we were stupid. And so we are having all this internal dialogue, beating ourselves up. And, you know, there's a fork in the road at some point. You either go the victim route and are like, okay, I just can't because of these circumstances. Or you go the other route and you say, listen, I am done with this. Like I have said many times, like when I went to write my book, I was like, this is the last freaking embarrassing conversation I'm going to have with my father about money. And now it's hilarious because I oversee some stuff with his business and he'll call me and say, well, this employee says this and that. I'm like, oh, great. Okay, let's talk about their productivity. Let's get them on the phone. And then he's like, okay. And I said, well, you're the one that taught me to go by the numbers. Let's look at their numbers. Let's look at how much they collect per hour compared to everybody else. And then you tell me if you want to still keep them on the payroll. And if you do, fine. It's your call, though. But
you definitely have to measure things, right? You have to measure. And you can't, like, if you don't know your numbers and you don't have, well, first, you just said so many great things. Like, look beyond the horizon. You got to know your end destination. You've got to write it down. You've got to review it. You've got to continue to review that. And not only that, but find the time. You wrote this book to help you solve your own problems. What is, in a nutshell, what is that book? Obviously I'm sure it helped you get your thoughts out there, but somebody who's listening, where do they find it? And what's the premise of the book that may help them?
They could find it on Amazon, number one. Number two, I have no interest in getting my thoughts out because I sort of get them out when I blurt things on social media all the time. So I was only writing it because, people kept saying, well, wait, I want it written down. So the net is that I show entrepreneurs why they are not making any money. And it's very, very simple. It could be a huge company, by the way, of why they're not making enough money or why they're not making enough money in a certain division. And it's very simple. I break it down to A, B, C, D, because I needed it to be very simple. So A, expenses or cost of goods sold. B is time. C is forget-me-nots, all the things that we forget, like, oh, I'm doing a party for a client, right? And I have to take them out to lunch and schmooze them. Well, my thing is that's a C expense, right? You got to do it, so it's therefore part of the expenses. And then D is overhead. And these days with virtual work and all this stuff, overhead is much easier to control. But the key thing is that B is that time. And so when you write down track your time for a week, that's the one thing I say to everybody. I don't care if you track it on your phone, a piece of paper, in the back of a napkin, it makes no difference. Somebody shows me how they track their time, and I don't need to know anything else about their business, and I can tell you how successful they are, because it's very obvious. It all boils down to how do you spend your time, period. And then I happen to show you, the other components that you need to know, that so that you don't have to go to business school. But I really show you why time, it's not money, it's not making more money, it's saving time and efficiency, period. I call it ROT, your return on time. If I spend an hour grocery shopping, which I don't do, everybody in my family makes fun of me because I have everything delivered. I have my nail people come to me. I have my physical therapist come to me. Everybody comes to me. Why? Because I'm a diva? Maybe, but no. It's because if I go get my nails done, which have to happen because I chew them so badly, then guess what? It's an extra 45 minutes at least driving and parking and all the things. Well, 45 minutes, you know how many customers I can call in 45 minutes? I could probably do 2 podcasts that are going to get distributed, as you mentioned earlier, to 20 countries. So no, I cannot go to the grocery store because A, that's 45 minutes, and B, because I have no self-control, and the one person who walks out with $700 worth of God knows what. So it all boils down to time, how you spend it and your return on it.
So the COVID really changed the way the services that are available to us. Absolutely. I think more people are willing to pay for service. In fact, I don't shop. I don't even shop for my own clothes. My wife does, and she's really good at shopping online. Yep. But you're right. When you go to the store, it may be, you're like, okay, I'm going to be in and out. Well, that's at least an hour. By the time you do all the things, you're at least, and what is your time worth? You're right. I could do X if I just give this up.
Well, like, for example, a friend of mine is always talking about how busy he is, right? But he goes to the supermarket like 2 or 3 days a week, and just to pick up a couple things. Now, sure enough, he probably is in and out, but I don't care. You still park. You still got to pick your stuff. Even if you just parked, went right, got the 2 bunches of bananas and went to check out and whatever, and then drove home, it's still too much time. The other thing, then he's like, well, I like to pick the produce or whatever. Okay, fine. So let's put that aside. Freaking go to the market. Okay. But then it's like, you know what? Why would you ever pick up a prescription? Why would you ever take your car to the car wash? Why would you ever take your car to get gas? Now, I'm not saying if you're not in a position where, okay, I can pay an assistant $25 an hour to go do that, right? I'm not saying, oh, don't make your mortgage because you don't want to go take your car to the car wash. But the point is that you look at, I can pay somebody for this X amount, and what can I do in an hour? Now, the discipline comes in when you say you got to substitute that hour, right? Like, I'm probably not going to want to take a nap if I'm saying I'm going to have somebody fill up my car and go to the car wash. But if I say, listen, okay, that just saved 90 minutes, which really it would have saved 90 minutes. So that's my secret sauce. 90 minutes, $25 an hour, let's say $40 an hour, right? So, excuse me, $40 total for 90 minutes. And in 90 minutes, I can write how many blogs, shoot how many videos. I mean, with your AI guy that was on here before, my God, I could probably make 10,000 pieces of content with that guy. Right? I could probably do 2 podcasts, wow, including hair and makeup. So it's an exchange. I'm going to give you this for a 10-time return on my money or my time.
When you're talking to somebody about their time,
yep,
how do you advise them on what their time is worth? Because I've had people say, you know, if I could make $50 an hour, I'm like, $50 an hour? Are you kidding me? I mean,
if I could make $50 an hour, if I were making $50 an hour and that were my goal, I would be, you'd hear about me on the news because I would have just jumped off the suicide bridge. So the first thing I do is I say to them, how much do you want to make an hour? And they, you know, they get into all this complicated. I said, no, how much do you want? Forget about if you can. I mean, all the stories that come up, and they say, okay, $100 an hour. And I go, okay, great, $100 an hour. And then I go through a couple series of other questions. How many days a week do you want to work? How many hours a day? Whatever. And then I say, okay, well, what did you take in last year? And they'll say, and then say, how much did you work? Well, of course, they always worked, 52 weeks. They had no vacation. They worked 12-hour days. And so I do sit there and kind of do behind the, on the other side of the napkin math. And I say, okay, great. Basically you're making $5 an hour doing it your way, right? So then I start showing them, and it's very simple. I say, substitute, pick your lowest level activity. Maybe it is, going to the car wash, I don't know, or filing or creating invoices. For a lot of people, it's like that kind of busy work, paperwork. So if I say, so take 1 hour, take 30 minutes a day, right? 5 days a week, and delegate that 30 minutes. Now, it could be delegated to a person. By the way, it could be delegated to an app like Zapier. I mean, there are a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
And so I say, okay, find 30 minutes a day. And then I just ask them, what are your highest level activities? Like, how do you get the most business? And they might say, I'm a great networker. Man, I can get in front of anybody and I can close them. Okay, great. Are you on social media? Yeah, I post on Instagram and I say, hey, go do this and I get sales. Okay. So the idea is I take one of their lowest level activities, but they probably hate doing anyway, and I substitute it for their highest level of activity. That convinces them right there, because guess what? They hate the one activity. They love the other activity. They can see, and 30 minutes a day, or even an hour a week if they're really skeptical. You substitute somebody's 1 hour of total unproductivity with 1 hour of their highest level brain activity, business, whatever, you will move mountains, and that will solve them.
Yes. Well, I could just talk to you forever, Marley, and go into, but so any last thoughts you want to leave with the audience? And then what is your podcast show? So we got a book they can go get on Amazon. Yeah. They can check you out on social media. All those links will be posted on the links when we post the show. Yeah. Well, I do want one other point really quick. Yeah. Most entrepreneurs have a key business before they dabble in multiple businesses. And I know that there's a lot of hype out there where people say, well, you have multiple streams of income. And I get that. But I do believe that you need to find a core platform like the catering business. Then you've been able to write a book and evolve from there. But don't try and do 5 things at once. It goes back to your point is, what is your most highest productivity? Do that first and get that revenue coming in. So
absolutely. And listen, you got to build one mousetrap and crush it. Okay. Now, multiple streams of income. I'm big on multiple streams of income. I do that. I do it successfully. Now I've done it very unsuccessfully in the past. And what I would encourage people to do is create their core thing, right? Their core business and that mousetrap. And then for multiple streams of income, I mean, maybe that is, every time you write something, you use an Amazon affiliate link. I mean, it can be $2 a month, $5 a month. There are ways to have income kind of coming in so that you can practice that without having 5 different businesses, right? And maybe your multiple stream of income is maybe, I don't know, you have a digital course and it's $4.97, and your multiple stream is you have, I don't know, on Udemy or something else where you have a $14.97 thing that just sells without you one-on-one, right? So there are multiple streams of income that are kind of part of the same thing. So that's one thing. And then the next thing is, so the book is, but are you making any money on Amazon or, wherever? And then the next thing is, and I would love to have you on the podcast. Love, love, love. It's called Every Day's a Train Wreck. And
I love it.
It's basically all about the backstory. So it's like, hey, my life looks really glamorous. I have all this, I've done all this. But when you peel back the layers, it's like, well, I have all this because I did this. I missed my kids' XYZ. I had to do this. I practically bankrupted my family. Thank God I didn't, on and on. And so I interview people, whether they're entrepreneurs, lawyers, publicists. I mean, it's really the gamut, but they have to be able to talk about the underbelly. So this looks great, but like in the equivalent of, this is the Instagram filter. Now show me the photo without the filter, without the fact that you promoted the post, without the, and show me what it's really like. And that's, I think, what gives people hope. You mentioned actually on one of your other podcasts, you said, not enough people probably talk about what's involved in being an entrepreneur. And the reason I like the subject and the reason I like that title is because it's to show people are, especially post COVID, right? The mental health crisis and all this stuff is just going through the roof. And I think part of that is because people feel badly about themselves, right? And it's like, even if you have a successful business, my God, so-and-so on Instagram has a more successful business. Well, you don't know that, right? And their marriage is, I just got divorced and they're married and have 2 perfect kids and whatever. Okay, maybe they do, but I guarantee you that something else, they still have a parent who's dying or a brother with cerebral palsy or something, they have some other significant burden or burdens. And so it's about, hey, we can see your perfect life. Now show us how you navigate when times are tough. And it's just you going to sleep with the monsters in your head going, you are not going to make payroll tomorrow. And now what?
Oh my goodness. It's somebody told me, is like, we see the baby that's born, but no one wants to see the process on how the baby was born.
Thank God.
And but yet for me, it was really hard. I mean, I've mentioned before, I've only been on social media about 3 years. It was what I was afraid of what other people would think.
Yeah.
I didn't want to put myself out there.
Yeah.
But I had to realize, this is how I mentally dealt with it, is that people need to hear that. And if I can impact one person,
right,
just one, which I know I've been able to impact a lot more. And I mean, I get people that run into me as I'm traveling. They're like, hey, I listened to such and such podcast show. It was great you had him on the show. And it's the relatability factor.
Yeah.
But there is stuff, like a train wreck, like you said.
Yeah.
There is stuff that happened along the way. And one last little key point is I was driving in the car the other day. I spent a lot of time with my kids, and my 12-year-old just turned 12. And he said, Dad, he's like, why don't people sacrifice 2 to 5 years to do what you do? And I said, son, I don't know. I said, because everybody has the same opportunity. And I said, and he's like, well, you've never missed a football game. You've never missed this, and this, a birthday. And I said, but it wasn't always that way. And he says, but you can do what you want when you want. And I said, yes, I can. And my goal is to help everybody achieve that and have the financial success that they're happy with. Now, my level of financial success may be different than somebody else's, but if they want to have the RVs, the cars, the boats, the house, then by all means, I want to do all the things I can to help inspire and uplift them to do the same. And that's really providing that service.
Well, because otherwise then we're on this planet for a finite amount of time, and depending on if you believe you go to heaven or hell or whatever, or if it's just over, it's pretty depressing. But when you think, hey, listen, I can spend some time on this earth and try to do something good, and that can multiply, and then those people do something good, and then that multiplies, well, then you genuinely do have a better world. But I think I can answer your son's question, which is, why do people not do for 2 to 3 years or whatever? And that's because they're more interested in, whether consciously or unconsciously, they are more interested in the short-term fix, right? Like, okay, I'll just have a cocktail instead of making another 10 sales calls. Or I will just, go from my day job and then sit and watch TV for a couple hours, right? Instead of, they're not willing to do what they need to do because you have to forego the instant gratification. So instant gratification has become more important than long-term goals.
And the one thing I did say is I said, I can't control what other people do, right? They have to want it for themselves.
Yes.
And they need to want it.
Yep.
They don't need it. They have to want it more than they want oxygen. And when somebody finally sees that is when the whole environment changes. Any last thoughts?
Yes. Depending on where you are when you're listening to this, if you are in a dark place, I promise you there is a way out. And the first thing is to just pick a lane and start, whether it's reading, listening to podcasts, something to just pull yourself out of it. Number one. Number two, if you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, yes, it's totally worth it. I've had 3 kids, just like childbirth. All of them were kind of miserable deliveries, but it's still at the end of the day is worth it. That's why everybody goes on to have, more than one child. So it's the same thing with business. But I do think what my advice would be is have an honest conversation with yourself and then be okay with the answers no matter what, right? Have an honest conversation. And just because everyone else wants to have a Mercedes and this and that, if you don't, that is okay. But then stop putting the pressure on yourself to do that. Just be like, it's cool. I'm not motivated by money. I don't need a big house. I don't need and then take the pressure off yourself. But if you want a big house and you want all those other things, then you've really got to ask yourself, okay, where am I now? What's my longitude and latitude? And where do I want to go? Which is, okay, big house of America. What do I need to do? Do I need to work more, sell more, have affiliate, whatever? What do I need to do to get there? And then work backwards with that plan. So those are sort of my key pieces depending on where people are.
I love it. Well, I would just say one other thing to add to that is do not give up, because the only person you're failing is yourself. And at some point, if you do it long enough for long periods of time, you will succeed.
Yeah.
You will.
You will, because so many other people, it's like, I think the Woody Allen quote is, 80% is showing up. And it's like social media or anything else. Even when it's not the most perfect, amazing content, just posting regularly is very, very valuable, right? And there's a great quote. I wish I could remember exactly what it is, but it's something like, don't ever give up on something you can't go a day without thinking about. And I love that because, like, for example, with me with the sheep, I mean, you can imagine with this ranch, and I mean, there have been more lows. Sometimes I feel like I'm sinking to China, and then I'll have a great high. But I go a day without thinking about it. I can't go an hour without thinking about it, right? So I think if that could just be everybody's guiding principle, like, as long as you can't go a day without thinking about it, whatever that is, your business, your idea, your current situation, then don't give up, because something is in there reminding you every single day to go back and keep trying. And I don't believe that that's by accident.
Wow. Well, all of you listening, go check out the book. Go get the book on Amazon. Go check out our podcast show. I mean, I could sit here and talk to her, like I said, for a lot longer, but I know she's got things to do. But check out the book. Go follow her on social media, and always share, like, and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.